obviously we have a pretty diverse meta we're in right now. But today I want to talk about 5 weapons I don't think are seeing the use rate they deserve. These are the underrated weapons that I think just need a player to push them in the right direction. And to clarify, this isn't a list of a bunch of low tiers I think are higher up. This is a list of weapons where I think the public perception of them differs a lot more from where I think they are. Of course, it's all my opinion, and let me know what weapons you think are underrated in the comments below. Subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get into it. There's no particular order for this list, but let's start with the Reflux. No, not that one, the good one. Now, this weapon originally had its perception fluctuating quite a lot. It painted a lot, it spammed the broken launch special in the game, but it struggled quite a bit with actually fighting. This is one of the few weapons to actually be balanced in a proper direction with both nerfs and buffs, with the painting being reduced, the spammability of missiles in their outside hitbox being reduced, but the main weapon getting a bit faster of a strafing speed, as well as having the bullets be closer together when charging it. And these buffs are a lot. It creates a reflux that can do partial charges that do way more damage and are very hard to hit. Between its fast tap shot firing, insane painting capability, and crazy strafing speed, especially with Tacticooler, Reflux is one of the fastest weapons in the game and really hard to pin down. And especially when it's close to you, the amount of charge this weapon needs to kill you or at least do 90 damage is really low. While its one shot at its maximum range is still really difficult and the range for it still isn't great, I think it's gotten a lot easier to hit it and it's been easier to fight in closer quarters combat. While its paint was nerfed, it is still pretty good, and despite missiles nerfs, I still think it's a great entry and location special. And even though you can't get a lot of them, Reflux is arguably the best one at getting as many as you can when compared to the other missile weapons in the game. While this weapon is still incredibly difficult with a lot of inconsistencies, I think the insane amount of speed, paint, and surprisingly high slaying capability gives the vanilla Reflux more of a chance to succeed than you might think. And number 2, the Dynamo Roller. This weapon recently got a buff that I think is a bit misleading. It reads just like its horizontal hitbox got bigger, but in reality, its damage as a whole seems to be a lot better. And I gotta be honest, as someone who uses this weapon pretty frequently, the damage hasn't felt this good on the weapon since Splatoon 1. Even if you stacked max main power upon it in Splatoon 2, it wasn't as good as this. Dynamo already has a very solid kit that could allow it to see use in the meta as a cooler option, and a few map modes that it works really well on. Generally things with a lot of cover that it can use its hitbox effectively on, such as Flounder Heights, Humpback Pump Tracker, Mako Mart, just to name a few examples. However, it had 3 main problems. The vertical flick just sucks at everything, it doesn't paint as well as it should, and the damage isn't great. But now, the damage one is fixed, and it's really threatening. It is an insanely reliable kill up close, and at a distance, it's a very solid 2-shot that can easily deal 50 damage, comboing with a lot of other strong area of effect options in the game, or just other players fighting in general. While its paint still isn't great, I think the gear freedom it has allows you to run a bit more charge up and main saber to be able to make up for that a little bit, ensuring the weapon can get a decent amount of cooler output. And while vertical flick still sucks, you could basically just not use it very much for the whole game anyway and not really feel it that much. I definitely think this weapon could still use a little bit of a boost to its paint output, but I think in some comps or niche maps, this weapon actually does thrive. It is officially graduated from low tier garbage. Number 3, Zimmy. I've seen some people say that the mini Splatling isn't that good a main weapon, and honestly, this is why I wanted to talk about it in the first place. Mini Splatling has actually been meta in both Splatoon 1 and Splatoon 2 for a little bit. And while both of those had much better kits, I think it's worth noting that Mini as a main weapon is in arguably the best spot it's ever been in. This weapon got a lot of buffs after its Splatoon 1 nerfs, and honestly, I think it led to it being a better weapon than it was in Splatoon 1, especially given the insane jump height that you're able to do with the weapon. And with how ink efficient it is after the most recent Splatoon 3 buff, this weapon paints a ton as well. And when you combine that with range that actually outranges most of the short range shooters and Tacticooler to give it its maximum run speed and ink resistance, you really get to see just how well this can bully anything with shorter range than it. And even against mid-range weapons, if it can get moving, it has a lot of momentum. The kit is definitely the reason we don't have a mini Splatling meta in this game, but I think against any comp where bubble is worth it, this is one of the best options you can pick. And the flexibility between painting, mobility, and fighting capabilities means the main weapon is in a pretty good spot, so I think a player dedicated to it could make it work. Number 4, the Bamboozler. We have not seen a lot of Bamboo since the days of MPU, and obviously when it had main power up damage up, it was way better. However, one nerf got reverted that I think a lot of people don't think about, which is Bamboo getting its 14 shots back instead of 11. Bamboo's high strafe speed, damage output, and paint on full charges means it's an incredibly difficult weapon to actually push against. And now that it's firing for way longer, the amount of time this weapon can lock down, especially flat spaces bases is really important, and that 85 damage really combos with pretty much everything. Like with Pencil, this has a slightly bigger hitbox than other chargers, and is fired way more frequently than that weapon. The kit for Bamboo is also really good. Its auto bomb is a cheap bomb it can use to find people and combo with the main weapon, on top of having one of the best killer whale combos in the game, since Whale barely even needs to hit an opponent for Bamboo to be able to one-shot with it. In addition to that, we've seen the return to more mobility builds with Bamboozler now that you don't have to stack a bunch of damage up, and I think that allows Bamboo's high strafe speed to really shine. I think this weapon has to be played really aggressively and take advantage of amazing off angles in order to thrive. However, when it does do that, I think this weapon has a ton of flexibility compared to the other chargers, allowing it to lock down areas and have insanely good matchups against other mid to short range weapons that I think is worth running. Finally, number 5. There wasn't an order for this, but I think this weapon is possibly the most underrated weapon in this entire list, which is the Dreadringer. I might have some personal bias to it because I've been playing it a little bit myself, but honestly, I've been really interested in this weapon and wanted to give it a try for a reason. Dreadringer's painting capability is a huge strength, more than you might think. There are a lot of other weapons that look like they have good paint. Stamper's a good example of it. You can see a Stamper Nuvo get almost 2,000 paint a game at times. However, there's a difference between getting a high paint total and actually being able to turn areas your team's color. That capability is locked to just a few other weapons. Within 3 seconds, you can easily walk into an area and paint pretty much the entire thing, which means if the weapon gets set up aggressively, you can't really ignore it. And while Reef Slider isn't an amazing special, you're at least going to have a lot of them, and Dread has very easy combos with them. You can basically just use the main weapon as a way to poke, and then anytime you get a hit, go for the Reef Slider, and the entire 70 damage hit is a combo, let alone the fact that you can slosh after as well. Obviously, it's still Reef Slider, which is possibly the weakest part of this weapon's kit, but in zones it has a lot more utility due to its high painting capability, and its ability to be used as a panic button is not lost on a weapon with the same speed as Range Blaster. And speaking of range, I think that's where it thrives. This weapon and Range Blaster get a lot of comparisons, and while Range Blaster has much better AoE and damage since it can one-shot people, Dreadringer has the ability to paint for itself, meaning it can actually be picked with weapons similar to Range that want to go for kills. And in addition to that, Dread has the ability to do a very high amount of damage, either 90 damage if you're hitting both sloshes, meaning it'll combo with pretty much anything, or spreading out the sloshes to guarantee a minimum of 42 damage, which again has a lot of ridiculous combo numbers. I also think the weapon has a good bit of gear freedom, and I've personally been experimenting with more quick respawn sets, since even when being played aggressively, you can still get plenty of paint during the game. I think this weapon feels a unique hole in comps, covering both area of effect and painting capabilities on a weapon that can be very aggressive, and normally running two really aggressive weapons like Range and Slosher, for example, are very comp specific, but if the Slosher is a Dread, it's a lot easier to make it work. Obviously the weapon still has Reef Slider, and that's the main difficulty in fitting it with comps, but I think the unique tools it brings to the table make it worth using, at least in zones. Let me know what you think about all these weapons in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.